My name is Jessica Enix, and I'm with the ASA staff, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Mr. Chad Waite. Chad is the Senior Channel Partner Manager at DocumentCrunch, and we are pleased to have you join us today. Welcome, Chad.
Hey, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. First, appreciate you taking some time on the first day of the week to kick off the work week and what is no doubt a busy time for I think everyone, especially considering the time of year. We are here, of course, to talk through everyone's favorite topic. That is tariffs, right? Everybody loves tariffs, or maybe not. Maybe you don't. Tariffs are it's an interesting topic because at this point it feels a little bit dated, right? Like it feels like we've been talking about tariffs for so long that it's a bit old hat now. But if you step back and look at things from a timeline perspective, implementation of tariffs and really even having them be a center point for discussion, that's been happening for about 4 to 5 months. That's really not even enough time for the supply chain to kind of go through a round of the elasticity that you have when you have this type of whiplash like this. And so, we still want to make sure that tariffs are something for builders that are top of mind, especially if you're in the subcontracting space. Typically procurement of supplies and materials, this falls on your shoulders, and you're the ones that are the front lines for dealing with the availability, the non-availability, the price increases, all the fluidity that is around materials when it comes to tariffs being implemented. Implemented and rates being changed and changed again. Sometimes it feels like it's changing every hour. We're talking about this now. We've given this presentation a few times, and it's interesting, right? Sometimes it felt the environment a little bit more fluid because things would be changing so rapidly. I can't believe I'm ready to say this, but we almost feel like we're in a state where there's a little bit more calm now, right? The precedent is that something hasn't been changed in the last week or so from a major perspective. That qualifies as now being calm. So anyways, setting the stage there a little bit for why we're talking about tariffs. Before we jump into even the presentation though, just introductions really quickly. My name is Chad Waite. I work for DocumentCrunch, a strategic partner here with the ASA. We're very happy to be on this because one of the things that we want to be able to talk to builders about is how to pair another very buzzworthy term that's getting floated around just as much as the word tariffs these days. That is AI. How is artificial intelligence helping subcontractors across the United States navigate some of the fluidity that tariffs are bringing to the table? And so in this presentation, it'll be about a half an hour. We want to look at just the state of tariffs, where they've come from, where they're sitting now. We are not experts in the legislative side. We can't predict where it's going to go and if anything's going to change, but we can tell you where things have kind of evolved from. And then ultimately pair in a solution that is AI powered, one that is offered by DocumentCrunch, and show you how it's actually helping builders like you navigate the risk and the pitfalls that are related to tariffs and spelled out in your contracts, or potentially even more important, not spelled out, right? Where are those pitfalls? And what do you need to be aware of as a subcontractor working on a job? Who's left holding the bag if tariffs hit hard? So let's go ahead and jump in. I'll echo what Jessica said. If you have questions, we're happy to take this ad hoc during the presentation. We'll have a Q&A at the end as well. And then there should be a recording. I believe ASA will be distributing this after from a recording perspective if you need to come back and reference this. However, I am going to, in the chat, put in my email here. You'll also see it in the presentation. If you have any questions at any point, before, during, after this presentation, reach out. We're happy to talk and give you our insights on where we see tariffs impacting builders like you. So let's take a look at the history for the past 5 months or so of tariffs and really how they've evolved to where we stand today. Now, being an AI company at DocumentCrunch, we try to use AI in a lot of what we do. So this is ChatGPT, and it is me asking it to give us a really high level summary of what we have seen from major tariff developments since the beginning of the year, or more specifically, the beginning of the new administration. And you can see that there's quite a bit of quite a bit of items here. This is most definitely a consolidated list. It is not you know completely all showing in any way, shape, or form. So you'll see that there's a lot of negotiations on what was put in. As initial trades, they spiked up 125%. We all kind of held our breath on that day because that was something where the material price escalation that would bring to the table is just unreal. Finally, we arrived, really though, at least for products from China, at a 30% tariff rate, and that's held pretty steady, right? Now, unfortunately, certain commodities, things like steel and aluminum tariffs, jump up, they double to about 50%. And then we start kind of rolling back a lot of the items that we had these really large 125% tariffs applied to, back down to 30%. So are you confused yet? Because I am. If it wasn't for a lovely ChatGPT summary of this, it would be really hard to get a linear perspective on what's happened, where do we stand right now, and frankly, how do we prepare against the actual application of all of this new legislation around products that are coming from out of country. In 2 words, it's extremely fluid, right? This snapshot taken, about a week and a half ago from June 11th, it just shows the fluidity. We're now saying U.S. duties on China will total 55%, although the figure is not new. Is this law or is it not? Is it set in stone or is it not? We'll have to see. But these are the type of articles that you as builders are getting fed every single day, and your job is to make sense of it, right? Because you can't plan for the future, on a dime, right? You have to look months ahead at the things that you're going to do, the products that you have to procure. And if things are changing hour to hour, day by day, it's very, very difficult. The things that can go wrong, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's really three major areas that we're seeing tariffs impact builders' operations. And the first is obvious. It's material price escalation, right? If you have a 125% tariff slapped on the things that you need in order to complete a job, that changes the game, right? Can you swallow that cost increase? Let's talk about where the tariffs currently sit at 30%, at least from Chinese imports. Can you swallow a 30% increase on this? A lot of times the answer is no. Shipping and receiving delays. This is also really interesting. I think I used the word elasticity a little bit earlier in this presentation. We'll have a couple analogies here in a moment, but the supply chain just doesn't turn on and off like a light switch, right? And when you start to look at the whiplash effect that tariffs have, especially when you start going through all this roller coaster motion of, bigger tariffs, smaller tariffs, is it on, is it off? This can lead to a lot of supply chain issues where shipping and receiving is a massive factor in addition to the price escalation. And then finally, dispute resolution. All of this rolls up to somebody holding the bag, whether that's cost for the delays, cost for new prices, increased prices on materials. Who's actually going to be the one to pay for this? And this can lead into some very interesting disputes that if you can solve these beforehand, if you know who's actually looking or how your contract specifically is treating things like tariffs, it can save you a lot of pain before you actually move into the job itself. And this, of course, is where AI can come through and take a look at things like your contract and say, hey, there are explicit ways to handle certain aspects of tariffs via your contract, or perhaps there's nothing in there as it relates to tariffs. These are the very, very important things that you need to have clear insight on before you move forward with projects. So let's talk the supply chain whiplash really quickly. It's the coal train analogy, right? You have a coal train moving at full speed. To slow to a complete stop takes about 60 seconds or more, right? Not particularly fast, but reasonably fast from full operational speed to a complete stop. Reaching that operating speed though, it's a very different ballgame, right? Getting back up to the point of standard operation is going to take it between 5 to 10 minutes based on a number of inputs. And this is very similar to the supply chain that we rely on, because you can press the emergency stop button and slow production down, slow shipping down, slow the actual output of necessary goods down relatively quickly. But restarting that is much easier said than done. So to illustrate this, I wanted this was for my own edification. I included this in here just because I thought it was fascinating, right? But mid-May, really when the first round of tariffs really got put in, and you started to see a lot of impacts on the supply chain side, I was curious what this looked like from a port perspective, right? So I went to Google Earth. I took a historical snapshot of what the port of LA looked like in January, before even the new administration came into play, just what a typical day looked at one of the world's busiest ports. And you can see here from this snapshot, almost every single receiving area in the port of LA had a cargo ship in it. It was very busy, very typical day, a lot of goods being transferred off of boats and onto shore. It was interesting because I looked for a comparison when I ultimately put this together. And this was about a month ago, so it may be a little dated now, but still very interesting. This was a screenshot of a video of a person who flew out of LAX on May 10th. It was on his TikTok account, so yay for sourcing from social media, but very interesting. You'll see that it's the same port, same area, and all of these receiving areas are completely empty, right? There's one major cargo ship in there compared to the 6 or 7 we see before. And so when we talk about the actual volume of goods coming through because of tariffs, there is a noticeable, very observable decline in this. There was another article that I had in here. This was just from a few days ago. Ignore the sources here. I forgot to take those off. But this was from an article on Business Insider where it was talking about the amount of cargo due to tariffs that the port of Los Angeles processed in the month of May. Now, they knew they were going to take a hit, right, for the amount of materials coming in. But even with the forecast on the hit, the port processed 25% less cargo than they even thought would be coming into the States after tariffs. That is an immense reduction. I mean, it's hard to wrap your mind around the reduction in the amount of raw materials, products, goods, things that are relevant to us as builders coming in through the port. So I show all of this just to show kind of the whiplash, right? Like, again, going back to that coal train analogy, I love it because it really is something you have to factor in. You can stop this quickly, but to get back up to a point where you can feel comfortable and reliable on the actual ability to source and project the ability to source your products and goods, it's going to take a while, right? Not to mention all the things about cost and who's left holding the bag. So a lot of variation in this world today, and tariffs sit right at the beginning of it. So how do we fix this? Well, maybe not even fix it. I don't want to say fix, because the reality is nobody can fix it unless you are, making a lot of the legislative changes there. So the best thing we can do is understand how we treat this. How do we prepare for these type of changes and whiplash within the supply chain? And really, there's 3 areas that we kind of center around, right? The number one thing is that the answers typically lie in your contract. Contracts are not everybody's favorite document. Yes, they're generally written by attorneys for attorneys, and so it's not the most enjoyable reading material, but the answers are usually in there. Or if the answers specifically related to something like tariffs are not in there, that is a very important area to be aware of. And that is where the second thing comes in, leveraging AI. how do you actually deploy something like artificial intelligence, which is the buzzword of the year, right? Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. Everybody wants to use it and become more efficient, but rarely do you know how. Rarely can you find an example that you can get a very tangible outcome that says, this is how you deploy AI to a situation like tariffs, right? We're going to change that by the end of this presentation. You're actually going to know exactly how to deploy AI and make sure that you can check off this first box where you understand how your contract is setting you up for risk or failure or success with tariffs, and then ultimately checking off that last box where it's risk mitigation, right? How are you mitigating risk? How are you avoiding these pitfalls well before they even come to fruition? It doesn't matter what happens with the tariffs. Have you set yourself up? Have you put yourself in a good relationship with your GCs, with your suppliers, in order to weather whatever happens, whatever rate hikes there are? It does not matter. We want to make sure that you're using AI in a way that is helpful and reducing the time that it takes to understand your contractual strategies. So, a lot of preamble there. Let's get into a couple questions before we jump into this, though. Right now, we've got 15 people on this call. So, for all of you right now, answer these questions. Do you have visibility into your risk exposure, right? Like, how many of you can actually say with complete certainty that you know exactly what your risk profile looks like when it comes to the jobs that you are either looking at bidding on or currently have in flight that you haven't handed off yet? I think a lot of people like to think they do, but the second question really answers that, right? How often are you reviewing your contracts? Have you reviewed your contract? Have you actually sat down and read every word of that legal language in your contracts against something like a situation like tariffs? And really, the answer a lot of times is no. And that's not a bad thing. It's because you're busy, and reading legalese, complex legalese, is typically not everyone's forte, especially when you have limited time in the day, jobs that need to be done, relationships, projects that need to be delegated. It just, there's no time left for that. And then finally, do you have a game plan if your material costs spike again, right? Right now, it's 30%. Tariffs came down from China from 130%, right? What happens if that changes again next month? What happens if some sort of negotiation falls through? Do you have a game plan, and do you know who is left holding the bag, or how you mitigate that risk when it happens? So really, the idea here is that the answers are in your contract. We want to find them. We're going to back up for a minute then, okay? I want to tell you a little bit about DocumentCrunch, what it is, because it helps set the tenor on what you're about to see as we deploy what it is to a specific scenario that is about tariffs. So DocumentCrunch is an AI-driven document compliance platform. Our goal as a company right now is to use AI to get to a point where you can have projects with zero disputes every time and have better relationships with the people that you interface with, whether it's GCs, whether it's your suppliers, whether it's directly with owners, doesn't matter. Zero disputes is the goal here, right? And zero disputes typically arises. Some may say it sounds like a pipe dream. We agree. It's hard to do. But if you can start with a very, very comprehensive, very thorough understanding of the agreement that you are signing when it comes to the contract, then you're one major step closer to that ideal outcome. So we can do that type of understanding. We can help you make sure that you're getting the right insights through something like artificial intelligence. So DocumentCrunch makes your contracts easy. We extract all the risk from it. We make sure that you're understanding what's in these big documents that you have. We automate a lot of the critical tasks. So if there are certain jobs to be done that you need to be aware of, we can help automate it using the power of AI. Obviously, best practices, right? We want to make sure that you're reviewing and understanding documents to their fullest, each and every job that you have. And that, in turn, reduces your risk. The less risk you have, the less chance you have for a dispute. No disputes means your profits are protected. Yes, it's a little pie in the sky, but we do believe it's possible because of this new world that AI is enabling here. Whoop. So, okay, we're not going to go to my information yet. We're going to go straight to the demo of the actual product that we have for tariffs. One more background item here. DocumentCrunch, when the tariffs really came to fruition, right? When we first started seeing them enacted, this was late February. DocumentCrunch went to the table and said, hey, look, we have this powerful AI, and it's all about reviewing risk in contracts in a general sense for builders. What if we were to build a product and redeploy it specifically to help every builder out there understand what their risks are as it relates to tariffs? So we did just that. What you're about to see is a purpose-built tool that is meant for understanding tariff risks. But here's the catch. Here's the kicker. It's free, right? And it's not, what I'm about to show you is not a free gotcha, here's, you can use it for like 30 seconds and then you got to pay or something. No, we want every builder, every subcontractor, every GC out there to be using this tool, because the more we can help people weather the storm that is tariffs, the better it is for the industry. So what you're about to see is free. We'll give you resources on how to actually get it after the fact. But if this is of interest to you, try it out. There's no strings. There's nothing attached to this. Like, figure out how you can protect yourself against tariffs. Okay, I'm going to switch my tab. We're going to go to DocumentCrunch. A lot of things happening here if you've never seen the actual product before, but what you need to know is really here on the left, okay? And in the center. Here we have an example contract that is about 48 pages long. And if I'm a builder, I'm a subcon, I'm doing some work for them, I need to know how this 48-page document treats the risk around tariffs, right? Well, what risks are we talking about? Well, we come over to here and there's something called our tariff preparedness checklist. And essentially what we've done in this product is we have run this 48-page document through our artificial intelligence and said, hey, AI, you are purpose-built to understand and analyze contracts through the lens of the AEC space. We want you to look for 10 areas of risk that we know are pertinent to builders understanding what risks the tariffs that are in motion right now are like to them, as per this contract. So we look for these 10 areas. Actually, I'm sorry, 9 areas rather. Material price escalation, that's an obvious one. What happens if the price doubles overnight? Changes in laws and regulations, delays and force majeure, change orders for tariff-related impacts, preservation of rights, contingencies, insurance and bonds, termination and suspension rights, dispute resolution, and ultimately labor and workforce shortages. Now, some of these risk areas are very obvious, right? There's a one-to-one nature with them, like material price escalation. We know that tariffs directly impact that. But as a company that deals with large processing of AI, we see a lot of trends in the industry. We know that these other areas of risk are places that tariffs may have some sort of peripheral impact on it. So labor and workforce shortages, maybe not the most obvious thing, but let's talk about the ports, right? We were talking about the ports. What happens when the Port of LA furloughs their workers because there's not enough incoming? And then the next day, tariffs are gone. That supply chain ramps up again, and they have a bunch of ships in the port in a week, and they can't get their workers back. And all of a sudden, that workforce shortage. Well, it's not necessarily your workforce shortage, but that is causing a massive delay in getting stuff into the port through customs and into your hands. So there's a lot of weird outliers here that a lot of people don't necessarily think of. But we try to at least identify the peripheral risk and then the one-to-one risk factors in here. So let's take a look at what this is actually looking at here. So the first one is material price escalation. We're not going to go through all of these. I would encourage you to get DocumentCrunch. You'll talk to us. We'll get you an account set up, totally free. You can look at each and every one of these as it relates to your contracts. But we are going to look at the first 2 here as an example. So material price escalation, this is the biggie, right? And really the idea, we try to give you a description on this. We basically say, like, look, the whole purpose of having this risk profile for material price escalation is to determine whether the contract includes material escalation clauses that allow the contractor to recover increased material costs due to tariffs. Pretty straightforward. So we come down here, and this is the summary that the AI has generated. Again, the AI has gone through the entire contract, asked certain questions that we have programmed and set it to do, and come out with this response. So the idea here is that we are trying to look to see if the contract explicitly allows for price adjustments due to increased cost from tariffs. And in this case, here's what we found. This contract does not explicitly contain any escalation clauses or mechanisms that allow for cost adjustments due to increased material costs from tariffs. Here's the important part. What do you want to do about that, right? If no escalation clause is included, the contract price is considered fixed, and bidders should account for potential tariff fluctuations in their pricing strategies. If you know this and you are still in a bid situation or a place where you can negotiate or come to terms with your GC, if you have a GC who's even willing to talk about that, look, you need to get that fixed, right? Like, make sure you can get language in there that starts to put a bridge over this pitfall. We don't tell you necessarily exactly what to do, right? Because you know the relationship that you have with your suppliers, with your GCs. You know how to hopefully have a conversation with them to get to a more equitable place. But what the AI can do is say, hey, there is no mechanism in place for material price increases from tariffs, right? The onus right now is on your back. If this is a project in flight, get ready for this, right? This is a project that's pre-bid and you're coming to the table, putting your hat in the ring, great. Make sure that you have put yourself in a position now where you can go negotiate this with the parties involved. The idea here, though, is this gives you this immediate understanding and clarity of where things currently sit with the agreements you have in place, right? You do not have to go through and read all of this legalese and try to make sense of it on your own. The AI has just done that for you. Okay, let's go back. Let's look at the next one. Changes in laws and regulations, right? So obviously tariffs are just that. It is a legislative change. And we want to figure out whether or not the contract allows for adjustments in cost or schedule if new laws, tariffs, or government regulations impact the project. Again, one that's probably pretty pertinent to everyone. So here's the summary. This was generated by AI. And I should point this out really quickly. When we upload this contract to DocumentCrunch and you run it through this analysis, it takes about 5 minutes, right? So all of this understanding, all of this generative summary, this is stuff that you see, and it takes about 5 minutes to give you an output that I would argue is even more comprehensive than if you were paying your best attorneys to do this. So here's what it was asking in this case. Does the contract provide relief, such as additional time or compensation, if new laws, regulations, or tariff increase costs or delay work? Let's see what the contract says. This one's interesting. It says the contract does not explicitly mention tariffs as a basis for relief. However, this section, and we do show the work on all of this, so if you ever want to double check the work, you just click into either the section or the page that's listed, and it will take you right there. Allows for equitable adjustments in compensations and or time if conditions differ substantially from those indicated in the construction documents and cause a material increase in the builder's cost or time required for performance. Here's the kicker. This could potentially be interpreted to include new laws or regulations. So we have just found using the AI that there is a potential outlet here for the impacts of tariffs because of the focus on new laws and regulations that we've been able to find in this section on this page, right? Again, this doesn't necessarily dictate how you move forward when you try to get more time or compensation because of the tariffs, but it at least shows that there is a basis or a common ground for saying, hey, new regulations and laws could actually trigger this. And this has been extracted directly from your contract in flight. Again, though, if you look at this, and this is something that it's a project that you are bidding on or you're looking at taking on, before you sign, if you want much more, certainty that you can get the time and compensation that you need, make sure that this is now something that is definitive instead of kind of, could be regular or potential to help that regulation offset. So, really powerful stuff here. Again, the idea is just to help you understand what is in the contract as it relates to critical tariff provisions. And this is, I'll switch back to the presentation here. Again, it's free, right? We give you 10 documents to go through and do what we call crunch. That's our internal vernacular for running it through the system. Scan this code. I will also share here in the chat momentarily a link to go and just fill in your information. All you do is you just talk to one of our reps really quickly. They get you set up with an account and you get off and running, right? Totally free. It's a great use case for also understanding how AI can impact you. One thing we love about this is, while we don't love the tariffs, it is a really, really good use case in understanding how you can deploy something that is typically somewhat confusing, like artificial intelligence, to a very pertinent, relevant situation right now. Use AI to understand your impact with tariffs coming into play and get to a better position with it. So with that said, I am going to go ahead and share the link in here in just one moment. And any questions that you have, we'd love to be able to answer, whether it's about the tariffs, whether it's about DocumentCrunch, whether it's about AI in general. I am going to put this into the chat though. Please click that link, scan that QR or QR code. Or again, if you have questions, reach out to me after this, right? See Waite at DocumentCrunch.com. We're always talking with builders across the spectrum. And it's conversations, right? You're not going to get a hard pitch or sold anything. I mean, let us know what's on your mind. We love to see the trends and what's actually happening for the people who are boots on the ground right now. Jessica, I do not see any questions coming through. So at this point, I will turn it back to you. But I hope this has been a good use of your time, a good break in the Monday to start off the week. And hopefully you're taking away a little bit when it comes to learning about some AI and status on where we sit with tariffs.
We actually did have a question come through from Shanna asking if it can review large contracts like up to 300 pages.
Oh, yes. That is a great question. So this little thing called the federal government, a lot of times they have very, very large contracts, right? Especially if you're dealing with like infrastructure projects and heavy civil engineering and stuff. We've seen contracts upwards of 5,500 pages come through our system. 300 pages is probably below our average. We typically process between 450 to 500 page contracts on average. So a 300 page one, yep, absolutely. I think our hard limit is 6,000 pages as it stands right now. We have not had one that big yet. But yeah, 300 pages. Is search criteria customizable? That is a great question. For the tariffs, no. For the free product, it is not. For DocumentCrunch, when you're doing a broader risk assessment for all sorts of provisions about your contract, yes, we can make sure that it's set up to match your risk review process internally. So typically we have about 45 provisions that we look for within contracts to say, hey, what is your risk profile for this, and this? If you already have a review process that you have internally, and you want to get the AI to match that, yes, we can absolutely customize it for that. For the tariffs, though, no, it is that standard 9 items that we look for across the board. Was there a limit on the number of free tariff checklist evaluations? Yes, we do limit it to 10 documents. Look, I'll just be totally candid here. AI review costs for this is pretty expensive, right? So we have to throttle it somehow because it costs DocumentCrunch a lot of money to make this free. So we do limit it to 10. If there are very, very big circumstances where you need more, you'll have a point of contact there, a rep. I mean, you can just ask them to, open it up a little bit more, and I'm sure that they'll be willing to oblige. But we typically have a limit of 10 for each and every user. Okay, another question from Shannon. Would we be able to upload our own standard terms and have DC search for conflicting terms? Absolutely. Yeah. This is the beauty of AI, right? Is there are a lot of deployable items. And I should say that DocumentCrunch from a platform perspective, beyond just the tariffs, is not just a review platform too, but it's also the execution side of it. So, to think about the risk review and we talk about where the risks are, what happens if we're able to take that same AI and say, look, now that you've come to terms and you've signed your contract, let's actually talk about how to set up playbooks and instruction sets for your field teams that prevent them from having to get into the contract, which, how many project managers or field teams do you actually know that are like nose deep in the contract every day? It's pretty few and far between. But we tell them, look, you can use this AI to create these very simple playbooks to help your field teams stay on task and compliant with the contract as they're doing their work and as the work is evolving. So the answer is yes, you can use it to benchmark your own terms and conditions, or really any document that you have. It doesn't just have to be contracts. It can be insurance policies, NDAs, MSAs, all of that. And it's a very flexible system for really understanding where you sit from a team and an execution standpoint against all of your commitments, your terms and conditions, the documents that you have that dictate how you move forward as a company. Great question. Looks like that is all we have for the moment. We will have a recording of this, and I believe Jessica and the ASA will be distributing this. So with that, I am going to go ahead and stop the share, or my sharing here. But thank you everyone very much for the time. We really appreciate it. And Jessica, back to you.
Thank you very much, Chad, for the presentation. And thank you all for joining us today. Again, as Chad said, we will have this available on the ASA online website. Please reach out to me with any questions, and we look forward to everyone joining us on our next ASA webinar. Thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.